Welcome in, everyone, to week 2 of the 2023 Key on Sports. It is the playoff podcast. As you guys know, we do about 4 of these a year during this stretch run. We're going to have a lot of fun tonight. As you can see, me and Cole kind of tagged up for this one. So doing our trick-or-treating early in the form of sports talk. We're very excited for it. Want to welcome back, as always, Brandon Soder-Penner and Don Cleary. As you can see, our man over here, Ed Daugherty from WHK. You guys are familiar with him. He and I have done quite a few games together over the years. If you've bought either my high school football book, my Cleveland's Finest book, there's a lot of Ed in that as well. So before we get going here, definitely want to thank Ed and welcome to the show.
It's good to be here, Vince. I mean, it's different to be on video for me. This is not usually where I'm at. I'm usually a radio guy. Even when it comes to college basketball, it's generally radio, or even if it's the ESPN Plus versions with Cleveland State, it's generally behind the scenes. It's not generally on camera, but I'll do my best and try to present myself as best as possible. For about 20 years now, I've been with the ACP Productions Radio Network, and for those not familiar, that's generally considered like a Northeast Ohio version of Westwood One. We produce the games, and then we find our partner radio stations to put the game on. 21 of the last 26 seasons we've been with WHK. We have been on WERE. We have been on WCCD, the Cleveland Catholic Radio, as well. From 98 to 15, we were the St. Ignatius home on radio. I had the duties of being the host for the pre-half and post-game show from 02 to 06, and then was the lead play-by-play guy for the Wildcats from 07 to 2015. And since then, since 16 on, we've been doing the game of the week regionally, kind of exposing everybody. Also done Case Western football, Case Western basketball, and now do 6 sports at Cleveland State, including the men's and women's basketball side. On the men's side is the hosting duties and fill-in play-by-play, and then have the play-by-play duties on the women's home games for ESPN Plus. So it's busy beyond a regular job, the opportunity to come in and do that. So for me, I'm a native North Olmsted. I grew up watching Eagles games on Friday night, and then I went on Saturdays to watch St. Ed's play. And right now, not only am I a graduate of St. Ed's, but I'm an investor in paying that tuition. Final year of that as well. So I will make it known that I've gone through the trials of being at St. Ed's as a student, went through Catholic grade school. My son has also gone through Catholic grade school and now is a player on the St. Ed's team. But that, for me, gives me a unique perspective. I grew up in North Olmsted, so I did see what the Eagles did. Was a Southwest Conference guy growing up, as well as some Central Ohio high school affiliations. We used to see small school that was winning a lot down in Central Ohio. We'd go to their games when we'd visit relatives down in the Columbus area. But I guess now with my resume out of the way, Vince, you want me to kick it off, or do you want to offer a question?
I'm happy to kick it off here. I just want to throw this out there too for you guys. If you ever see Ed up at Mitchell's in Westlake, he likes his wings extra crispy. So just make sure you get the order right. All joking aside, the Daugherty family is actually very important to the McKee family, and I'll explain why quickly here before we get going. His daughter Kate, as you heard Ed mention, has actually been working with him for years. I was in a press box back in 2016 when my daughter Maggie was 3. And looked over and saw Ed with his daughter Kate and thought to myself, my goodness, is that special? As he was calling the game, she was his spotter, his statistician, his producer. Us here at Key on Sports, we learn pretty quick. Kate knows how to do it all, right? So me seeing that as a father made a lasting impact. And you guys have also seen, who follow me, I bring Maggie with me to a lot of basketball games and teaching her the ropes. So cool stuff. So just wanted to shout him out for that. But we want to get going, guys, because this is a huge night for us. A lot of things to discuss. We are going to let Ed start, but here's the things I kind of wanted you to touch on, and then we're going to throw it around the board. A lot of hot topics last week, guys, and we heard you. I got the voicemails, the emails, the text messages. It was nonstop for a couple of days. We heard you. Thank you for the input. Basically, Ed, as a father and someone who lives in Olmsted Falls but is paying a St. Ed's tuition, who has called games for Ignatius, who has called games for Ed's, I firmly believe you're the perfect person to speak to on this. I would like to touch the hot button topic above all else last week was should the playoffs be separated in the postseason between private schools and public schools? If not, if you're going to stick with 16 teams per region, should there be 12 and then a bye week? Does recruiting only happen at Catholic schools and private schools? Does recruiting happen everywhere, like I firmly believe it does? On and on and on. What disadvantages, and this is something I really want you to hit on here before we throw it around, what disadvantages does a Catholic school have? I've always said the parents have to pay the tuition, the kids have to make the grades, and those kids don't begin to learn those playbooks and those coaches until their first day of their freshman year, as opposed to city schools like in Olmsted Falls with Coach DeLuca, where they learn it from third grade up. So Ed, I know you had a lot to say. Take it away.
Well, I would think from my perspective, the idea of separating the publics and the privates really comes down. The argument is only based on football. And that comes from, if you look at different sports around the state and the ones that the OHSAA sponsors, nobody's talking about splitting the gymnastics into two separate public and private, even though Brecksville Broadview Heights has won 19 consecutive championships in 20 of the last 22. You look at wrestling at Division II, St. Paris Graham. So Graham High School has won, I believe it's 21 consecutive Division II wrestling championships as a public school. They've won 22 of 24. Track and field, boys Division I. Over the last 54 track seasons, only 6 private schools have ever won a title. 2 with Chuck Kyle at St. Ignatius as the head coach, 2 at St. Ed's, and 2 with Cincinnati LaSalle. The girls track and field teams, Division I, 30 seasons, they've had 1 private school win. They did win it 4 times. It was Beaumont. So really, this is, I guess, even if you want to look at basketball, 20 years in Division I, 15 public schools have won championships. 5 have won from the private side. And of the 5, 4 of them have been Cincinnati Moeller. So in reality, this is really about Division I and Division II football. And it can't be about Division III through 7, because if you go back to 2016, over the last 30 competitive seasons, so 5 years or 5 divisions, 6 years, no public or private, no private school has won from Division III down since 2016. It's really about St. Ed's winning now in kind of the third wave of dynasty, if you will, at Division I, and then the fact that Akron-Holben is winning a lot at Division II. Other than that, I don't know if there's a call in any other sport to split it up, and really, I don't know if you can split it based on the schools in Division I and II in football. I think it would create chaos. I really believe if you all of a sudden you have a separate public and private divisions, the publics would simply walk, or the privates would simply walk away. And then you'd end up with the wild, wild west. We see it in New Jersey. We see it in Washington, D.C. when they're not governed by the OHSAA or governed by a state body. Then all the free-form money in the world can come in. Youngstown Ursuline, Youngstown Cardinal Mooney, they can start getting players from 3 states. You got players that live across the river in Kentucky. They're probably closer to Cincinnati Elder or Cincinnati Moeller than some of the kids that are making the trip from Mason down to those schools. And in the process, they can go over to Highland, they can go over to Dixie Heights, they can go over to other places in Kentucky, say, come across the bridge, play for us, if they're not governed by the OHSAA. And there's also not enough schools at the big school level to really cut them out. You're only talking about 5 at Division I and 9 more at Division II. It's just not enough there to make it competitive, which is why the private schools would simply walk away. And the OHSAA couldn't say, well, at Division I and Division II, you're not going to play in the state tournament and make a separate one from them. You're too good, therefore you can't play. I think that's a fallacy that exists here, because across the board, it's competitive on the 700 to 800 schools that compete in the OHSAA. It just right now, the focus is on Division I and Division II football.
Well, let me ask you this. You know, I'm coming out of camp last year out of the state championship weekend, and my one thought was not a popular one, but my one thought was, what is Glenville doing playing Division IV football? This is ridiculous. How'd they pull this off? That was atrocious. No one cared. All anybody wanted to talk about last year coming out of state championship weekend was the Springfield head coach and his illusions about recruiting at St. Ed's and St. Ignatius. And, when you look at it in the years I've been covering high school football, St. Ignatius has been to one state title game. This is not the 80s and 90s anymore where they were dominating. Where are these? I want to be very careful with my words here, but what makes it okay for a school like Massillon with their open enrollment for anybody from anywhere could walk right on there? Yet when a private school does it, suddenly they're recruiting.
Well, from my angle, I think that the coaches, and this goes back a long way. Let's not just say that this is Maurice Douglas and his argument at Springfield when he claimed that St. Ed's had kids on the team from 38 counties and the dormitories on the west end of the campus at St. Ed's were living on campus. You can go back to the Hudson coach about 10, 12 years ago when St. Ignatius beat them in a playoff game. And then you can go back to the 2009 championship game at the lower level when Youngstown Ursuline beat Coldwater. The Coldwater coach at the time was dying of esophageal cancer. He got thumped because his team committed 5 turnovers against Youngstown Ursuline in the title game, and he lost pretty big. But in the post game, all he wanted to talk about was how Youngstown Ursuline was bringing in kids from all over, and he had a little town of 4,000 kids to grab players from. So even on his deathbed, he still was insistent that if he beat a private school, it was because his team was better. If he lost to them, it was because they recruit. And Maurice Douglas basically said the same thing this past fall, and the coach at Hudson said the same thing about 10 years ago. Maurice Douglas beat St. Ignatius 2 of the last 3 regular seasons. He also has beat Moeller in the playoffs in order to get to the state title game both times. And then he lost to St. Ed's. He can't say, and Douglas, he did, but it really is a weak argument to say, yes, we're a better team when we play Cincinnati Moeller, but St. Ed's has the advantage because they can recruit. Well, Moeller's in the same boat, and coming from him, it's a little rich considering that his quarterback was 50 miles away coming into his senior season last year. So I don't buy, I will tell you, I think there's advantages to the private school. There are advantages to public school. It's a matter of using it. Kirtland absolutely has an advantage at Division 5. Tiger Laverty has found a way to do it, and it's mostly because he's keeping his kids at home, and he's in kind of giving them the playbook. Steve Trevisano did the same thing at Mentor. The kids in Mentor get a playbook, 24 base plays, and from the 3rd grade on. So by the time they're seniors, they've been in the system 10 years. I don't know about the recruiting argument doesn't really hold water for me because at St. Ed's, they didn't win a state title till 2010 in football. Does that mean that they didn't understand that they could recruit from 1949 to 2010, but the coaches in the wrestling room one door down could and knew what the secret was, but forgot to tell the football coaches?
And hockey.
Hockey has won titles. I think the thing that makes teams successful, especially in Division I and Division II football around the state, is consistency of coaching. Steve Trevisano proved it. The guy at Pickerington Central has proved it. At Pick Central, they are the most successful football program over the last 25 years when it comes to total wins in the state of Ohio. So Pick Central has done it. St. Ed's has had a consistent coaching staff from John Gibbons then to his son-in-law, Tom Lombardo, over the last 15 years. You throw Rick Fanati in there a little bit as well. Chuck Kyle, obviously, with his 40-plus seasons. Guys that are successful. Steve Speck at St. X. Those guys, because they have the consistency, I think is the reason that teams are successful, get to the Final Four and win.
Well, so I wanted to throw this out there for you and let Dom kind of chime in. Dom, you brought last week to the show an interesting perspective as somebody who played high school football in a completely different state, PA, right? And you said Ohio could take a lesson in certain areas from Pennsylvania. Can you elaborate on that for everyone?
Yeah, and before I go into this, PA has a lot of problems of their own. They had a 4-division system that worked fine. They expanded to 6. Now it's a mess. You'll find parts in the state. Where I'm from, we don't have 4, 5, or 6A. It's all small schools until you go up to Erie, and there's only 3 that play 4 to 5. So PA has its issues. It's very Pittsburgh oriented. Those teams actually play less games in the state playoffs. And so I'm not saying adopt that system in whole, because that PA system, it favors Pittsburgh. And Ned, you seem to know a lot about different states. You seem to know when talking to Vince, that you knew about PA as well. So you probably know about this. I mean, PA has always favored Pittsburgh, but one thing I always liked, especially in football, was that it felt like we had our own regional playoffs, right? We had our district playoffs. You had a title, you'd bring home a banner, right? And maybe that's not maybe that feels like a participation trophy for some people, but it was awesome beating the teams that you played all year, and some from Erie that they're the same level with you, but they weren't in your conference, region in PA, but conference in Ohio is what it would be. I enjoyed that. If you won your district, then you went to the state playoffs. We would play 4 to 5 games in the state playoffs. It's not like here where it feels like you have your semifinal or the quarterfinal and then boom, right into states. It's the one thing I liked about PA is it felt like you almost had to qualify. You had to go through a gauntlet. I mean, if you're in Pittsburgh, if you're the 1 seed, there's no guarantee. I mean, and one thing with Eds, it feels like, especially with Ignatius not up to par like they have been. I know Iggy's a private school. It doesn't feel like there's a public school that evens out with Eds. In PA, it always felt like there was a school, even if it was smaller, evened out with a private school. I mean, we saw the other week in Pittsburgh where Pitt Central Catholic lost to Pine Richland. Again, Richland, they're who knows how they get those kids, right? It's a public school, but Pitt Central Catholic. I mean, Dan Marino went there. I'm pretty sure. I mean, Darrell Rivas went there too. If I could, I might be wrong. That school, they're getting their athletes from somewhere. Kennedy Catholic, they had a family from Mali, Africa, giving their kids essentially to one family, the Canante family, coming to Kennedy Catholic and then going to play D1 basketball. How did they find Hermitage, Pennsylvania, or Sharon, Pennsylvania? I don't know. There's recruiting in Pennsylvania too, but I'm just. I mean, Reynolds. I mean, Ed, you probably heard of Reynolds High School when it comes to wrestling. I mean, they compete. They've competed with Eds before in the past in these tournaments. That school shouldn't even be in business. They graduate 40 kids, and somehow they're the best state wrestling school in the state. Doesn't make sense. There's
all
issues there.
Go out for wrestling.
What'd you say, Vince?
Because all 40 kids go out for wrestling.
Hey, well, funny enough, kids from my school will magically decide that school's better for education purposes. It happened. That kid almost wasn't allowed to wrestle that year. But, that's beside the point. PA has its issues. But I would like to see almost like a district system, maybe not separate, because then you have a school like Holy Name or Elyria Catholic. How are they supposed to compete? If they're going against Eds and Ignatius and any other powerhouse private school, they're just smaller schools. It'll be hard for them. Again, it wouldn't bother me as much if they did separate it, right?
So
but at the same time, it would hurt schools like Holy Name and Elyria Catholic. Go ahead,
I will
Ed.
tell you that my only reservation about the districts and reading about stuff, and I told you I have family in Columbus, I also have family in central Pennsylvania, so familiar enough with some of the Catholic schools, Bishop McCourt being one of them, as well as Johnstown Catholic before they closed, Altoona, the Little Lions, up in that area. So the only reason I don't like the district format is that it's basically the state tells you who your opponents are during the regular season. In Ohio, the idea that the teams can pick and choose who they want to play or if they want to join a conference. The banners for conference titles, let's look at the GCC, 8 teams now. Cleveland Heights comes over after 100 years of playing in the Lake Erie League, coming over and they win the championship in the GCC. They will hang a banner for that. You go into a lot of public schools, you'll see Southwest Conference banners. You'll see a lot of either old Pioneer Conference. If you go into Berea-Midpark High School, you go into Strongsville, you may see those before they went to the old Northeast Ohio Conference. And then I think the point system works in that it has a built-in strength of schedule. If you win and your opponents win, you're going to qualify 1 through 16. And ultimately, Division I is a little odd only because it was an attempt 10 years ago to kind of shave off the top 10 and make sure that those big schools had just 72 schools competing for the Division I title, and then everybody else is evenly divided. Before they expanded to 7, everybody in Division 1 through 6 was basically even divided. You had about 120 teams per division. You had about 30 per region. And at the time, it was It was 4, and then eventually got to 8 teams made the postseason. I'm not opposed to the 16 in the postseason, only because teams like even Elyria last week, who got beat by St. Ed's, and they were overmatched. But the extra week of practice for Coach Fox coming in and bringing in his new system, and if you look at what Elyria did in the first 6 games, they were confused. They really weren't picking up what he labeled as his juggernaut offense.
Right.
But the last 3 games before they faced Berea-Midpark in the final game of the regular season, they put it together. They had 1 point or 1 possession games decided, and they did get a win over Amherst in that situation too. They were picking it up, and you could see even in the playoff game last week against St. Ed's that team loaded with juniors, and an extra week of practice was imperative for them to get there. They had some drops, and they had some big plays against Ed's. They rolled up almost 200 yards passing. They didn't run the ball effectively, but they did throw the ball and had a lot of. So the only thing I don't like about the districts is that the state kind of comes in and says, okay, you have to play this many games against these specific teams. And whether or not that's District 1, District 12 up in Erie, I would much rather see you kind of pick and choose what conference you want to play on. And in knowing that you're going to play 7 or 8, or even in the Southwest Conference in the GLC until a couple of years ago, when they had 12 teams before the Parma schools combined, they played for a title in week 10 of the regular season. And they played everybody. And the old Southwest Conference, when they had 10 teams in that conference, they played 9 games. It was a complete round robin. Everybody played everybody, and you knew who won the title. And then from there, you could advance into the postseason. I actually wish that Pittsburgh and even Western PA would get away from the districting, because I think there are matchups in the state of Ohio. I think there are plenty of teams from Lake Catholic to even some of the public schools up along the I-90 corridor that would actually benefit from playing teams like McDowell or playing teams like Erie Cathedral Prep on a continuous basis. Unfortunately, those teams are locked in and unable to play multiple teams. That
they have one non-conference, which it used, I can't remember. So my freshman sophomore year when I played from I can't remember, from 14 to 18.
At the first school?
2 Hickory High School.
Okay.
Yeah. So we were 3A. We were dominant my first few years and kind of haven't been the same. But we played schools like Farrell and Sharon, old powerhouses of the 70s and 80s and 90s. Farrell's still a powerhouse. But Sharon and Farrell, they were in the WHIPIAL. They decided that they wanted to then be in District 10. So District 10 in Mercer County all the way up to Erie County. And now Farrell wants to get back to the WHIPIAL, and they might just be allowed, because of strength of schedule, they can play a school like Hickory that graduates 170, and they'll beat them by 30 every year because there's that much talent in the building. They might end up going down and playing in the WHIPIAL. Farrell played out west. Hickory a few years ago played Ursuline and got destroyed. Erie Cathedral Prep, they also played out in Ohio. Erie High, I believe in like week 6, played out in Ohio. So again, the one thing that's nice about the district system compared to the conference system, and Vince, I'll be done here so we can then move to Brandon. But we're seeing a conference right now. It's slipping my mind right now. I think it might be the Great Lakes Conference that's dissolving.
It is.
Am I right there?
Yes, they voted out the Catholic schools.
Yeah.
Hold on. I was going to say, ironically enough, they voted out.
Yeah.
The schools.
And I know that's part of the conversation, but now you have 2 schools in Holy Name and Elyria Catholic that are left conference list. Like they now have to move. Now I know they're I believe they found homes, but it's just all of a sudden the schools don't want to play them anymore. Now they're find somewhere new to play. That's what I always liked about the district system is who you're going to play. It almost felt like a grudge system almost, where we knew that our rivals were Sharpsville, Greenville, Farrell, Sharon. We knew who we were playing, and sometimes you play a school up in Erie, which was nice, right? That's what I liked about the district system. And then you go into playoffs, and that it kind of opens up a little bit more. Now you're traveling up to Erie, and you get to play at cool venues. I mean, there's no home games in the playoffs. I mean, we're playing at Slippery Rock. We get to play at Du Bois. Hey, you get to travel a good part of the state to meet these teams halfway. They say halfway. It's not halfway, Ed. Not at all.
No, and travel has never been, even in Ohio, with the way they draw some of the districts. There are teams that are putting on themselves 2.5 hour bus rides just in the first or second rounds to get there. And Locally here in the Cleveland area, because there have been enough teams, the travel isn't great, but it is confined. Region 2 has some guys. If you're in Toledo, there's only one big school in Toledo. That's Toledo Whitmer. If they want to play and have to come play somebody, they're going to have to play on the road in the first 2 rounds. They may end up in Columbus. They may end up over in Troy. It's a long way, and Region 7 is really spread out because it cuts across the entire state. So they get to the neutral sites in the 3rd round through the 6th round, and the championship game is obviously played at Fawcett Stadium.
Well, here's an interesting thing about this panel tonight, and this is why I absolutely love this. People, I don't think every now and then realize this, but all 3 members of my broadcast team, Dom, Brandon, and Cole, all played high school sports. Obviously, we know Cole straight through BW, and Dom Clary straight through BW. But what many people might not realize, and you mentioned a little bit earlier, Berea High School, one of the greatest doubles tennis players to ever come out of there, Brandon Soderpenner, our young man here with the backwards hat, the sun, and the glasses. But this is a true story. So Brandon was phenomenal tennis player to come out of Berea, one of the last graduating people to ever come out of Berea High School before the merger. So I ask you this, Brandon, and then we're going to go to Cole too. Both of you guys, we'll start with Brandon. Both of you guys, though, did you ever feel that maybe you would have had a better advantage if you played at a private school? Or did you ever feel your career might have had better numbers to it if you would have played at an Eds or an ACIS or whatnot? Or is it something you never even thought about until last week when Cole brought it up?
I'll say just from a funding standpoint and a coaching standpoint, yes, I absolutely think that had the resources been there, the training could have been better. I'm not trying to throw any particular coaches under the bus, but in a school like Berea at the time that was severely underfunded before the schools merged, you just didn't have the emphasis on sports that weren't football or, had a decent soccer team at the time. So there just wasn't as much kind of allocated to that. So in that vein, yeah, I believe there could have been some advantage. I don't think it would have made me the greatest player to ever live, anything like that. But it's just a resource deal at that point. Now, Berea-Midpark being combined, I feel like they've probably fixed a lot of those issues because it was fairly extreme before I was out of there. It was the last year before the schools combined. We were paying quite a bit of money just to participate in any kind of sport at that point. It was kind of, the wheels were falling off a little bit. So yes, I do see a little bit of that. To actually go beyond sports, it's private schools. We're making this argument about football, and I completely understand that. But again, to kind of speak to what Ed was saying earlier, you've got plenty of public schools that just go on absolute tears and seemingly are able to recruit, even though they quote unquote can't based on their zoning and everything. I remember doing Academic Challenge. I was very involved in for 3 years. And every year we ran into a buzzsaw with Olmsted Falls. They won, I think, 20 plus state championships in a row in Academic Challenge. And you can't tell me that all the smartest people in the world just happen to be born in Olmsted Falls, Ohio. It doesn't happen like that. So I see. I don't know. Go ahead. But except Vince, obviously. But
no, you said Olmsted Falls. I was teasing. No, I'm like, I know some of the residents.
No, fair enough. But so at least in the sports that I played, I don't think it would have been a massive advantage by any means. It was just tennis and golf for me. I will say there is also something to, teams or players getting playbooks way ahead of time. Once upon a time in middle school when, I thought I was going to be good at football. I played middle school down in Georgia, played football for 2 years because I was 5'7", 250 pounds. Here I am now, 5'7", 200 pounds. So obviously that growth track didn't continue. So I had to kind of drop out of that. But we were kind of a pipeline for Northside High School, which was a dominant force in high school football 4A for Georgia for a very long stretch of time. I think they're still actually competing for state titles fairly regularly. And it was the same thing that the coaches communicated back and forth. It was a direct feed to that school. And we were getting the plays that Northside was running, or at least like a watered down version of it from a very, very young age. And again, that school ended up being dominant. So, at the end of the day, we're talking about a competitiveness, like a major competitiveness disadvantage with the playoffs right now. And it might be a little bit of recency bias, as Ed said. Ed hasn't really been winning titles regularly since 2000, or like until 2010 rather. The big thing for me, just looking at the entire situation, isn't necessarily just separating the Catholic schools, because like you said, there's just maybe not enough schools for that to even be a viable option. My whole thing just comes back to the bye week, and we got a little bit of pushback on that because, coaches like to be able to keep the rhythm. We even see it on the professional level sometimes. Like, a team gets some time off and the competitive, like their edge just wears down a little bit for whatever reason, not just having that live action. You get settled a little bit and you're just not as sharp when you come back out. That said, look at the other side of the coin. I know they won last week, but I mean, like North Ridgeville, for example, would have absolutely loved to buy. And if I'm not mistaken, they are the 4th seed coming out of that division, correct?
Do not have that in front of me, but they played the 11. So actually, I believe they're the 6.
They were a little bit lower.
6.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will
So
say
they would
this,
not have gotten it.
the coaches proposed 12 when they expanded from 8. And you have to remember, I mean, I go back a lot longer than you guys do in terms of the playoffs. I remember when I was really young, there were still 700 schools that played football in the state of Ohio. They had 3 divisions. They had 4 regions per. So that was 12 regions throughout the state, and 1 team made it out of each region. Each region was about 65 to 70 teams. So there were 10-0 teams that didn't qualify. And then in 1979, they expanded to 5, added a second team that went immediately to the state semifinal, or into a regional final, and then into the state semifinals. And then they expanded again to 4 per region, and eventually 8, and now 16. The 16, I believe, is more the OHSA gets a chance at money. And the coaches wanted 4 or wanted 12, not 16. The OHSA said go to 16. In the process, though, I think if you're the 1, 2, 3, or 4 seed, I think you treat that sort of like a bye, especially if you know that you're more talented, in that the number 1 seeds won 28 of the 28 games played in the 7 divisions this year. But if you take that out, the rest of the state was still only about 144 to 47. So there were 47 upsets of a lower seed beating a higher seed, including a couple of 15s biting actually it was 3 that came up and bit the number 2 seed. At the St. Ed's game that we covered, Coach Lombardo freely subbed at the end of the first quarter, but it allowed him to keep his rhythm. He's a rhythm guy. Coach Lombardo is. He enjoys making sure these guys on Monday watch film, on Tuesday they do this, Wednesday they do this, and then Friday they go to the stadium. He's not opposed to Saturday games, but he would much rather play Friday. And he treated it more like a preseason NFL game where you would see guys play a quarter and then come out. Prevented injury, but it allowed them to continue to get hit and feel the game. The 16 is growing on me. I wasn't necessarily in favor of it when they started it a couple of years ago, but I'm seeing the value in it because I saw what it meant to Coach Fox to get an extra week of practice with his guys. 224 games, 400 plus. They get 1 extra week. Now, I don't know what that means for Euclid because, again, they're in transition. Tony Fisher's trying to decide what he wants to do with this head coach. But overall, I think it's a good enough program that seems to match, because football is the only place in the state of Ohio where everybody doesn't make the playoffs. Every other sport that they sponsor, the OHSA, has all the teams make the postseason. So you're going to get first round matchups in basketball, in baseball, where it's 18-0 after the 3rd inning. You're going to get those kinds of matchups. And it's up to the coaches, and I think that most of them do a pretty good job of pulling back the reins when they understand where the situation is. Chuck Kyle did it last year against John Marshall when he got up early, freely subbed. They beat the team 35-0 in the postseason. Coach Lombardo did the same thing here this week. Other people are doing that. Now, there are some coaches that don't, and they like to pad some stats because it's an opportunity to do that. The 16 is growing on me. I am beginning to like it. I think 16 games, though, is definitely a lot to ask of high school kids.
Yep.
And the only reason that it's felt like, and Vince, you mentioned this last week as I watched, that it felt like the season started early. That had to do mostly with the fact that you have to set the semifinals at Thanksgiving weekend. Thanksgiving weekend is early this year, which means the championship games fall early in December. Instead of December 5th or 6th, they're going to be December 1st, 2nd, and actually November 30th is one of the title games on the Thursday night. When Thanksgiving is later, the season's going to start a little bit later into August, about August 24th or so. So you got to get that extra weekend. You could do it what Indiana does. Everybody makes the playoffs. What they did was they took a 10-game regular season in Indiana. They chopped off the last game of the regular season and called it a playoff game. And so everybody makes it. And then that week 10 becomes your playoff game. Everybody gets 10 games, but one is really a playoff game. Ohio could say, we want to go back to 9 regular season, but then the OHSA wouldn't make their money. I'm not a big fan of the OHSA in terms of the money grabs that they have. And this one certainly feels that way, especially because they're underpaying the schools that are hosting the first 2 rounds, and they're collecting all the gate. They're not sharing the gate like really they wanted or had kind of sold it that they would. So there's a lot of things there related to that. And we can do that at a different time, Vince, because I have my own opinions of the OHSA.
It's okay. And to clarify, yeah, it starts way too early, but my reason was it's the same weekend as my anniversary and my daughter's birthday. So about all you football people, I couldn't care less.
My anniversary is in the middle of the football season, Vince. I don't get it off.
I owe my wife like 8 dinners. I mean, it's rough. So Cole, the man who sparked tonight's conversation, go right ahead.
Yeah, wanted to let everybody talk here and get to discuss things since I'm probably the one to likely ruffle feathers. So I'm the strong proponent of the splitting the private schools and the public schools. So I'm going to give my background here. I went to private school up through 8th grade. I went to public school for high school. So I've gone to both. My thing is this, and I'm going to turn to soccer. I, again, played in high school at a public school. I then went off and played at Baldwin Wallace. My biggest thing is I think almost no sport is probably more unbalanced than soccer in general. And why I would argue that in many ways is this. One thing is we know with the private schools, obviously you can come from wherever as long as the parents are willing to pay the tuition, right? Kid can go there as long as they have transportation to get to school, go to classes and things like that. A lot of times, though, of course, private schools are expensive. It's a lot to pay for the tuition. I'm sure, Ed, you know that as well because you're paying for private school tuition too. So if people are taking on the burden of private school tuition, a lot of times those parents, those family members are at least in a good enough spot to be able to afford to do that. In the same sense, then they're a lot of times the ones who are then helping push for their kids to be able to play club soccer and travel ball. Football's different, right? Where football, if you have somebody who's a one sport athlete, again, you can't play football here in Ohio all year round. Again, it's great to be a 3-sport athlete and play basketball in the winter or wrestle in the winter or play other sports. Soccer, if you don't play club, you fall behind. You're not going to make it at the next level because you're not going to probably get there. And the people who do probably aren't going to get a ton of time to play trying to get to that college level. You need to play all year round. So the people who a lot of times their kids go to the private schools, they can afford to then send their kids off to then play club as well and make that financial commitment. What you see a lot of times with the public schools, certainly some of the bigger public schools, Columbus, some of those places, maybe again, because they have easy access, because they live close to some clubs, it's easier for them. I came from an hour west of Columbus, right? It was a travel. It was investment. I was on a team in high school, probably of 3-4 of my teammates played club soccer. I was one of the only ones. But I can tell you this, coming from Division III boys soccer, at that time, Cincinnati Summit Country Day, a private school, they ran Division III soccer at that time. It was about 4-5 state championships in a row when I was in high school. By the time I graduated and went to college, they had dominated D3 so bad, they got bumped to D2 because nobody could take them down. They were so dominant. Now you also look at Division I boys soccer right now. St. Ignatius right now is sitting on 4 state championships in a row. Not only is their first team, you can look at a lot of these private schools, not only is their first team loaded with club players, their JV team is, their freshman team is, they have people who play all year round who are actually decent players, don't even make the team and get cut. And so the thing is, some of these private schools have such a plethora of weapons with these guys who play all year round. It's so beneficial where you get it's onesie, twosie, spotty at some of these other schools. I know for me, I mentioned Cincinnati Summit Country Day, but Dayton Christian, Xenia Christian, Troy Christian, all those schools were tough every single state tournament and knocked out a ton of good public schools. So I think boys soccer is one where obviously, like I said, and we can look girls soccer as well, where a lot of those private schools, they have that advantage because of the club aspect and travel. And so that's kind of where I came from, where I felt that way in high school. And then to this point, I still somewhat feel that way. Not for anything against the public schools or anything against the private schools. I just think there's an advantage there. Absolutely. So now, obviously, Ed, you mentioned St. Paris Graham as well for wrestling. That's right in my neck of the woods because I came from West Liberty, right?
Okay.
So that's right over there by Urbana. My dad was a state champion wrestler in high school and went off to wrestle at Ohio State, and very tight connection there with the Jordans. And obviously everybody thinks the Jordans in Graham. And I can tell you, again, that's one of those things where when you have a good program, right, everybody looks to them, they want to go to that school. And of course, them as a public school, though, what a lot of times happens, as we know this, they're wrestlers. A lot of times their family moves into the district, right? In middle school, right? They moved them in middle school. So then they're
That never happened.
there to prep. They're there to prep, basically, and then they're there wrestling that whole time. So I won't dispute that at all. But like I said, I think that private school side of things, there is that advantage. Certainly, I do see that, especially with the sport of soccer. And then we turn to football, right? And the word everybody hates is recruiting. Okay. What's recruiting? What's not recruiting? And I don't want to dive too much into that, right? Because it's tough. There's so much gray area with that, which is difficult. But what I can tell you is this, again, from my private school experience, all my classmates would have been, some of them 45 minutes away one way, some were 15, right? It was from all around the area, right? As long as the parents were willing to pay the tuition, they had transportation to get to school. Again, that's the main thing that matters there. And so certainly there are some schools rather than others in public school that maybe they have it more open for open enrollment, where others have it more tightened up. But I think it's almost hard to regulate that in the athletic side with the OHSAA when everybody's all together.
I think the OHSAA has a big problem when it comes to the club situation. Ice hockey is one that comes to mind as well, because there are a few teams around here, Gilmore Academy, St. Ignatius, and a couple others. They have an elevated club team that plays almost nationally, especially East Coast. They'll be in Buffalo, they'll be in Pittsburgh, they'll be in Philadelphia, Washington, D.C. for tournaments. The OHSAA says as long as they play 5 games within the state of Ohio, then they're eligible for the OHSAA championships. And so what happens is St. Ignatius has a varsity team, but they also have a club team. Gilmore has the same thing. They have a club team. That team comes back and competes for the state title. Now, that's the only championship that Gilmore has won in the last 15 years has been in ice hockey, and it's because they brought their club team back to play against varsity teams. I think Brecksville Broadview Heights has the same situation when it comes to their gymnastics team. I've seen that personally come through. They have 2 club feeder schools that are right there. They also have gymnastics clubs that magically some of the people that are in districts that are close end up in that district to compete for Brecksville Broadview Heights. Soccer, I know that Mike McLaughlin over at St. Ignatius has made a run recently, and a lot of his kids are club kids. And volleyball, you see it as well. You're really not going to be successful in those sports unless your kids are playing club and playing 8, 10, 12 months a year. If they take a month off, that may be about all they can do to be successful. And the competitive balance number, I think, needs to be adjusted, but I can live with the idea of adding things to that, where schools will get bumped from a Division III or up to a Division II. The problem you run into is like St. Ignatius in soccer or St. Ed's in football or other schools like that. You can't go higher than Division I. They are where they are. And that's so you could give them 1,000 on the competitive balance factor, and you're still only going to have, they can't go anywhere. I will tell you, the OHSA has made some adjustments. I think they can make a few more. But the recruiting aspect of it, I understand people talk. But if you look at the numbers from like St. Ed's, and I'm mostly familiar with that with the football team here and with some of the other sports that go on at St. Ed's, about 85% of the kids at St. Ed's are either legacy kids or have some form of connection to the school, or they were public or they were private school kids growing up. They went to the Catholic grade schools and they fed into that. So there's about 10% that aren't. Vince, we can go back to the Brian Hoyer situation. The Hoyer family lived in North Olmsted, but Axel made no bones about it that after what he saw the success that St. Ignatius had had the 10 seasons before that,
Yeah.
Brian, when he got out of the grade school, North Olmsted Middle School, he was going to St. Ignatius to play football. And you look at even now with the Eichenbergs that were in Westlake, they did not go to St. Bernadette's, but they were members of the parish. They played at the public school, but they made no bones. They were going to a private high school, and it happened to be St. Ignatius, and now one's in the NFL and one's on his way to being in the NFL coming out of Ohio State. Eddie Andrews at St. Ed's right now, he's a third-generation kid. He grew up in West Park. I'm telling you right now that he had no option. It was St. Ed's. His dad is a Hall of Famer. He has 7 relatives that graduated from St. Ed's. That's where he was going. So I think there are coaches that do talk to players. They do it at the open house. They sell the school. They sell the situation. And success also sells that. And I don't know how you go about doing that. But if you're a soccer player, you're a 7th grader, you're on a club team, regionally, and, Mike McLaughlin happens to be there and talks to you after a practice, he can say, well, my teams have won 4 state titles and we have a nice campus down on West 30th. Why don't you come to an open house and see what's, do you like the school? If you're not affiliated with a grade school that feeds into St. Ignatius or traditionally does. Is that recruiting? I don't know. I know EC got knocked for a recruiting violation this year that I thought was a complete kind of scam because the coach wore an emblem over being a mentee for somebody at Elyria High. But I think that's the battle between Coach Fox and some of the administrations between both those schools kind of fighting each other out.
Well, let me tell you something too here, Ed, just to kind of chime in with the whole legacy thing, right? I mean, there's unique examples, and this is the first time publicly I'm even going to mention this. So here's a very unique example for everybody out there. My nephew is one of the top 8th grade basketball players in North Carolina. And I know I joke around a lot, but I'm being dead serious here. So my nephew, Matthew McKee, is actually visiting St. Ed's in 3 weeks. Here's the difference. And my brother, Don, okay, who's probably the biggest St. Ed's sports fan you're going to find, right? He moved to North Carolina about a decade and a half ago, so 15 years ago. Now, clearly, I live here in North Olmsted, Ohio. So Matt's coming in. Our full intention is for Matthew to move in with me next year as a freshman in high school. This room, this office behind us becomes a bedroom, and off we go, right? So there's nothing illegal with that. They'll pay the tuition. He'll make the grades. He'll live in North Olmsted. I'll make sure he goes to church every weekend. So there's unique situations like that. Now, you might never hear the name Matthew McKee again. I hope you do, or he might go on to be one of the best basketball players St. Ed's has ever had. Are what we doing morally wrong? No, I don't believe so. Is what we're doing ethically wrong? I don't think so. It's unique situations like that I think people don't have enough information on. That I guarantee you, I guarantee it. If he comes home, plays for Eds, and does really well, there's going to be problems. Guarantee it. People will
Vince, I have a question on what you said.
Sure.
What if now? I agree with you that there's nothing you can't. You look at that situation. There's nothing you can point to see that's a recruiting violation, that they recruited him, right?
No.
It's just that's a situation that would work out best for him, right? And his future success. But what if he was doing that and going to Berea-Midpark, right? I don't know I know the girls' basketball situation here, but what if he just came out of nowhere from North Carolina and went to Berea-Midpark or North Olmsted, because that's more realistic? Do you think that would alarm people at all, or do you think just the fact he'd be attached to Ed's
that would be under the radar?
That would be the big thing.
That's my whole point, Dahmer. My whole point is let's say he was going to Ignatius to play football, or Ed's to play hockey, or wrestle at Ed's, or play basketball at Ed's, whatever. That's the problem. Okay, even Padua or Holy Name. Let's say that for whatever reason I had gone to Padua, my brother Don had gone to Padua, and we wanted him to be a Bruin. It's the fact that it's private school that's what's going to alarm people. And again, I'm not going to run my mouth and say he's going to be the greatest basketball player St. Ed's has ever seen. You know what I mean? My brother wants him to play for Coach Flan. I would love to see him play for Coach Flan. That's the thought process. And quite frankly, I just want to see more of my nephew. But those are the situations that I think get blown up. And a guy like, what's his name again with Springfield, right? The Springfield football head coach.
Yeah.
He would hear something like that and lose his mind. And the next thing you know, a guy like that would say, oh, well, yeah, that Vince McKee's got 6-7 people living in his house, right? Like that's how they do it. So I just want to throw that out there. Like, I don't have a dog in the fight yet, but again, in about 6-7 months from now, I will. So that's the kind of situation that I think before we move on to the next topic, just to kind of close this one.
Yeah.
Guys, great spirited debate tonight. Ed, I want to welcome you to stick around for the rest of the show and tackle a few more of these topics. How does that sound?
Very good. I'll be here.
I think the last thing I want to say,
sorry, go ahead.
The last thing I want to say was just me being the strong proponent of it is that I know, because I talked to some people here recently who I knew their kid went in and played at, St. Ignatius or some other schools for a different sport. And I asked, who made the initial contact? Was it you guys? Did you pursue it, or did the coaches pursue it? And every single person had said the coaches pursued it. Wasn't on our radar until then. But I would still say, even though I would deem that recruiting, I don't necessarily think it's morally wrong, right? Because you look at these private schools, right? It's one of those things where a lot of these schools are full of athletes. I think the stat we heard on Ed's actually
from Harkins
was over 80% of Ed's student body at this point is athletes.
That's right. Yeah.
So we know that a lot of these private schools, right, in order to have people, because not dealing with districts and bringing in students, right, you need to have people coming in, right? They want to have good teams to encourage people to come in, but at the same time, again, they need to have bodies to keep the school open.
Correct.
Okay, so I don't have a problem with that at all. My only thing is that I would like open enrollment for public schools to maybe be tightened up a little bit and be more uniform. But you can't make that more uniform when you have the publics and the privates together, because it gets too much gray area and it makes it messy. So personally, that's just why I like the idea of splitting it, because as much as there should then still be rules for the private schools if they're together, again, I think then you have their own set of rules, but at least they're playing with each other. And I'm okay with it opening up almost a little bit where they can more openly recruit, but to be together. Public schools then maybe tighten up some of the open enrollment for some schools compared to others, right? And make it more uniform. It's just hard when everything's crossing over, because the way the schools are run, the way they're set up systematically is different. So we're talking about things where they're systematically different from their base foundation, and they're competing against each other. So it just makes it really difficult. But I think where most people get heated is rather than from the sports aspect. They think if I bring up the word recruiting, I'm saying that it's morally a problem. And the biggest thing I want to say is I don't think there's any moral issue with any of that. I think it's strictly just based on how I feel about there's too much gray area. And I think there's going to be no perfect system, right? But I don't think the OHSA is going to change anything. They're not going to. It's too much work. It's going to be too messy. It's going to be too controversial. But ideally, in an ideal world for me, I'd love to see it split up. But again, it's going to take too much work and they'll never do it. But morally, again, I don't have any issues if there is any sort of recruiting or anything like that.
My only concern is you step up to that line, and the split will be, if we're not going to compete in the same postseason tournament, then we're not going to compete. Then why would we compete during the regular season as well? And eventually they will walk away. My experience with seeing what happened in New Jersey with teams like Bergen Catholic, St. Joseph Regional, Paramus Catholic, some of those schools have come in and played football against other schools. Paramus played Cleveland Heights this year. When the New Jersey Athletic Association said, you guys are out, and they were allowed to then do whatever they wanted, they basically have been able to destroy student athletics in Paterson, New Jersey, and a few other big districts. There aren't kids willing to play because anybody that has any talent then just walks up to one of these schools. There's some money handed to them. Their tuition is paid for, and now they're on an athletic scholarship. Paramus Catholic, actually had kids coming in from Connecticut. They would take the train into New York Central, Grand Central Station, then out to Paramus to play football. We run the risk in Ohio of that happening, where it then would just become the wild, wild west. And that's the fear I have. I think if you look at things, you can maybe try to find that competitive balance, but the split may be worse than the actual ailment.
So to conclude the conversation, we all hate Maslin. Okay.
Yes.
So moving on.
More than most. Absolutely.
I had to give it to you.
You have
Sorry.
your family who went to
Austin
Maslin.
Brawley again. There's no nepotism. Yeah, my cousin Austin Brawley, who now plays for Ohio OU. So just to answer a few questions there from a few people who reached out to us last week. No, Cole did not root for the Sun against Frosty the Snowman. No, Cole doesn't hate puppies. He's actually a good guy. So stop the hate, please, and thank you. All right, let's have some fun, guys. A couple of quick hitters to wrap things up tonight. We're going to go around the board. We're going to start with Brandon, who really deserves a chance to talk, my man. You got to talk for like 5 seconds there. So we are going to start with Brandon. Tonight's first quick hitter. I will preface this by saying if the OHSAA, when they have playoff games on Friday night and Saturday night, playoff games, you know where Vince McKee is going to be Friday and Saturday night in a press box. I love it when they do that. I'm not a fan for all Friday nights. I know last year we talked about this a little bit. What is your feeling about it? Should they separate it starting with round 1 right off the rip and have playoffs 2 nights on the weekend?
Well, first off, I know, Vince, I haven't talked a lot, but if I'm going to yield the floor to anybody, I mean, Ed, you've been absolutely awesome tonight. So thank you again for coming on to this. Like, that, I have no problem with that at all. Now, talking about the question, Fridays, Saturdays, if we want the split or not, that I look at it from 2 different perspectives. From the media side, when working with Keon Sports and maybe a little bit selfishly, I like the Friday, Saturday split because that means we can realistically go out and cover more games. We've got a larger coverage web. We don't have enough people. Nobody really has enough people to go get every single game, especially early in the playoffs, covered in all of Ohio. When you split it up a little bit, it makes it easier. I know we're the closest. We're the biggest by far, but still makes it a little more difficult. When you split it up, you get more eyes on the athletes. You get more eyes on these games. So ultimately, I think that is a good thing. The only kind of pushback I see and how I would like it from an athlete's perspective, because it goes back to the same reason of not wanting the bye weeks. You want to keep your rhythm. You want to keep your flow. And like, I remember going out again, and this is tennis, which is a completely not nearly as intense as football. When we go out to like tournaments and things like that on weekends, it was just a completely different kind of rhythm and of warming up. Like, I imagine playing football, you go through your school day, you've got your whole deal, getting ready for the game. It feels normal. You get hyped up throughout the day. The students are there hyping you up. Then you go out to the game and you play. But then when you shift to the weekend, things are just different. Things feel a little bit off. And I'm not saying that's any excuse for a team to lose or to use as an excuse for losing a game, but it just disrupts the normal kind of flow of things, especially if your team doesn't regularly play on a Saturday. So I see both sides of it. Selfishly, again, I want them to go back to the Friday, Saturday split, just again, so we can get more eyes on some of these games and see some of these players that really deserve, coverage and recognition that may not always get it from a week-to-week basis. But I do get to an extent why, the student athlete might like to keep it on Fridays only.
Yeah, Italian Stallion directly from Hickory High School. Tom Clary.
Yeah, so PA actually plays Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, depending on depending what division you are, it's different, right? So single A's are smallest up to 6A, the biggest, and if you're single A or double A, you're either playing on Fridays or Thursdays, or Thursdays or Fridays, and once you get the triple and up, you're playing on Saturdays. I loved playing on Saturdays for the playoffs. For regular season, loved Friday nights, right? But there was nothing better than Saturdays, because for the district rounds, our school hosted games. So we would have our practice, and then we'd, shower, get dressed, We'd watch the Thursday playoff game. And then Friday, we had an additional practice. So we had a 5th day of practice we typically did not have, right? And so we had one more full padded day of practice, which was also great during the playoffs, right? And then we get to watch another set of playoff games in our own place, right? And, usually we go home early, right? Saturday, go to the school. We have breakfast all set up. The boosters are there. Some of the parents that do extra support are also there, making breakfast. We then go in the locker room and we get to watch, we're watching early college football games that day. It's just the whole experience was fun. I just remember as a senior, just kind of just relaxing. We just had a little hefty breakfast. It's noon and we don't have a game till 7, right? And there were sometimes you played at 1 on a Saturday, which also wasn't bad. You're getting home semi-early, which I preferred doing that. I hated waiting all day. And you actually hear that like a lot of college and professional players, they hated it. They hate playing night games. In college, the 1 o'clock games, chef kiss, right? But 3 o'clock games are horrible. Even 3 o'clock or I barely even played in college and I hated it. You get anxious the whole time, right? You want that game 1 o'clock, right? But I like the Saturday games. I think it adds a little flair. It makes you feel like you're playing on a college football game day. I think it helped me going to the next level, getting into a routine. Because again, you're sitting there for a while. I like it. Again, maybe that's more of the once we get into division 1, 2, 3, maybe 4, but I'm fine spreading out, and it allowed our local radio station to cover three different games. And again, Ed, you'd benefit from that. We would benefit from that, and even our competitors would be okay with that, just because it allows you to cover so much more ground, and it also allows a recruiter. I mean, there's a lot of colleges, D3, D2, D1 in Ohio. I mean, just Ohio. You know how many days a scout could go for BW to these different schools, or Ohio State or OU or Akron or Toledo? It's 3 extra days of playoff games you can watch. And if it's on Fridays and Thursdays, it's even easier for colleges. So I'm all for even moving some games to Thursday for some of the smaller schools.
Well,
So
Cole,
Vince, I'm going to jump in real quick on that. Dom mentioned the player experience. Brandon, you mentioned the media experience. I'm going to tell you from a parent experience as well as from a broadcast experience, all the playoff games on one night spread your officiating way too thin. I don't think you get the quality officials you would expect for a
That's why PA does it, Ed.
Yep. I know that there are plenty of officials that work Tuesdays and Wednesdays for the junior high public schools here. And they do Thursdays, they do the freshman games. Friday nights, they do varsity. And then Saturdays are traditionally either varsity and or JV games as well. You compress all of those guys that are eligible for that. I don't know if you're getting the highest quality at a lot of these games. And the OHSAA is only paying for 5, sometimes 6, depending on the size of the game. Whereas during the regular season, St. Ed's routinely in their home games has 7 officials. They pay for 7 to come in to make sure that it's well officiated. I think the officiating is a missed mark beyond the media, beyond the players, that impacts high school football. If you have to spread 5 or 6 officials over 224 games throughout the state, I think that's a mistake as well.
Cole, I know last year, and by the way, that's a great point. I feel the same way. Cole, I know last year you were Friday night or bust. I'm guessing you have not moved from that.
Yeah, I gotta say, everybody's talking about, Friday and Saturday and those things, and you all make really good points. I mean, Ed's spot on. There was already an officiating crisis really in all sports, right? There's not enough officials out there. And especially, as officials get better and better and they want to turn it into a career and they move up the ladder, right? Then you're trying to replace, and it's a hard thing to replace them with quality officials at any sport. So especially at football, when you have more officials out there on the field rather than, soccer where there's 3, basketball where there's 3. And again, that's definitely stretched thin. So Ed is spot on with that when you have everything on Friday night. Dom's, certainly has the experience talking about from the football player aspect, right? Where enjoying playing on Saturday, gives a little bit of something different. You play in the day, you don't have to wait around all day. Yeah, that's a good point. And Brandon's spot on from a media aspect. I love the idea of being able to split it up. It'd be great for us, for Keon Sports, and for all the other media companies out there to be able to cover more games. But from my standpoint, selfishly, I don't want high school football to touch foot on Saturday. If a high school football game gets in the way of me watching the Ohio State Buckeyes, I'm going to have a conniption. I'm going to lose my mind because I want to watch Ohio State more than I want to watch the high school football game. And I love covering high school football. But again, Ohio State takes priority for me personally. And so that's what matters more to me. And again, I just think too, as well, the other thing to keep in mind when you move games to Saturdays too, there are a lot of areas here in Ohio, because there's a lot of universities where the stadiums of these schools in Ohio, these universities, are also used as the neutral sites once we hit those points. So then that creates then a scheduling issue with trying to figure out where we're going to have some of these neutral site games. You have all these other high school stadiums, right? But you have Akron and some other places where those places are used as
For a long time, you had Baldwin Wallace.
Correct. And
Yeah.
VW was for a long time. So there's a lot of schools that are also used as those neutral site locations. So if they have home college football games on a Saturday, then that takes a lot more coordinating as well. So there's a lot that goes into that. Personally, like I said, I see all the good of splitting it up. Again, I'd hate to see it go on Saturday personally, because again, I also know that there's other sports going on there, a lot of college soccer as well, volleyball. Again, is they're kind of hitting the playoffs, the tournaments themselves right now. And then, like I said, you have college football, and there's a lot going on with that. So personally, I wouldn't want to see it, but I understand the reasoning from the college aspect of not wanting it. From the high school aspect, it makes sense. And I think that's where there's that little bit of a divide there on that too.
So I'll say,
Well, Vince, don't make him cover the late championship game on Saturday of championship weekend, because it's going to be the
We have
Big
it
Ten
covered.
title game.
we have it covered.
I'm in the press box. I've always got the iPad up and we're always streaming. I've got multiple screens and we're streaming games.
Last year, I kid you not, because the World Cup was going on, right? So
Yep.
we had the World Cup, we had the Big Ten championship, we had the SEC champ, we had everything we needed.
2 laptops and an iPad.
was
That's
great.
all you need.
When you're spending 15 hours on a Saturday in a press box, you got to make it worth it. Plus,
Yep.
Kate came up and visited us. I mean,
I'm sure she did.
she did. She runs that place, by the way. So, anyways, moving on. I'll say this: during the regular season, I wish it was Friday nights only, with the exception of the Holy War. Keep the Holy War on Saturday. There's a special feel for me for that. I love WrestleMania Sunday. I love Holy War Saturday. I love NCAA Final Four Saturday night. There's certain things that, like Dom said, sometimes you just kind of wake up and feel it, right? So for me, though, for playoffs, I actually got to shout out PA. I would love that. If the playoffs were Thursday, Friday, Saturday, oh my God, I'd be doing monkey flips.
Now, Vince,
Kill me.
what,
but I'd be doing flips.
one thing that you don't want from PA is that they play in Hershey, Pennsylvania. It is the worst state championship venue.
Didn't they take that away,
in
Don?
the country? In the country, it's still in Hershey.
It's still in
it-
Hershey. I had heard that they had moved it out of Hershey, that the stadium was not going to be used for the title game.
So the winner of the WPIAL, which mind you isn't the Pittsburgh League, plays at Heinz Field, not the Pittsburgh League. That's the suburbs. They play at Heinz Field. But in the state championship game, you're playing in an empty Hershey Park in a stadium that's been falling apart. If you are from Erie, Pennsylvania, you're driving 5 hours. It's stupid. I'm sorry.
I'll say this.
Ohio
You can
has
get
it
your
right
chocolate.
Yeah.
here. That's it. Yeah.
I'll say this because we really need to move on. But here's the, and it's funny because I was literally just thinking about this exact thing today. So I always feel bad state championship weekend for the teams that play at 3:00 on Friday and Saturday. And let me explain why. So Thursday night is usually the Division II state championship game, Hoban, whatever. And it's always a showcase, Massland. It's always a showcase. All us media people get in the box. It's that, you're in for this big weekend. It's a great feel to it. Okay. You wake up Friday morning, you head to the stadium at, 8 in the morning, whatever it is. The first game kicks off at 10, and you think to yourself, hey, this is really cool. All my sucker friends are at work and I'm here in this press box, right? You're enjoying this, right? So you're enjoying the moment. And then you get to that 3:00 game and you start thinking to yourself, damn, getting kind of tired here. And in your brain, you start thinking about the Division I state championship game that's going to get played that night at 7:30. So I always feel bad for that 3 o'clock game on Friday. It is the most overlooked. And then you look out on the Canton Freeway and everybody's coming home from work and there's a traffic jam.
Yeah.
I just feel so bad for those two schools and those two teams because that 3 o'clock game on Friday is completely empty. Saturday is a little bit better, that 3 o'clock game. But again, last year we was thinking about Glenville. Can they do it? Can they finish the perfect season? I always feel bad about that 3 o'clock game. But they won't listen to me. The first state championship game I ever covered was 2016. I loved every second of it. It was Xavier and St. Ignatius, went into double overtime. I'll never forget it. It was played at the Horseshoe, Ohio Stadium in Columbus. I would love it if they put it back there. They're not going to do it, but I like that stadium 10 times better than Canton. But again, I think maybe we kick off next week with that topic because I think that's a loaded topic in itself. Should they?
Oh, there's others to discuss on that too, Vince, because it used to be shared in Canton between Paul Brown Tiger Stadium and Old Fawcett Stadium. So you would have two on one day at Paul Brown and one in the middle would be at Fawcett. And then the next day it was 1 a.m. at Fawcett, then over to Paul Brown, then back to Fawcett. And they would get 6 in 2 days. So that's a combination that didn't really work either. And unless you were the lone game at Paul Brown or the lone game at Fawcett, where you had the parking lot for full tailgating all the way.
And I'll say this too. And again, we should really say this for a different episode. I actually like Paul Brown Tiger Stadium better, but I'll leave it at that. It is one of the I know he's done. All right, so
I will never go back.
Oh, I know.
Ever.
Story for a different day.
That's right.
But, anyways, go Tigers. No, thank you. Anyways, so segment 3, we're gonna let Cole begin. And again, I'm gonna show my age here, so I apologize. But growing up as a kid, all right, the Houston Oilers, Warren Moon, the run and shoot offense. Fun to watch. They didn't win any championships. The Buffalo Bills, scoring like crazy. Fun to watch. 4 straight Super Bowl losses. It wasn't until I was a senior in high school, and in 2000, would have been January of 2000, the LA Rams, St. Louis Rams, the fastest show on turf, finally won a Super Bowl with a nonstop offense, right? Now, we see it right now with Medina. Okay. Yeah. And you three more than anybody here, because you covered them multiple times the last 2 seasons. Can that actually win a state championship this year? Why or why not? Or is it just something fun to watch?
Well, I think the main thing is the only way that an air raid type of system like that can win is if you have a top quality defense on the other end who can stop a team. And that's the biggest thing with Medina. It's not the offense. The offense can score. They can put up points in a hurry. We know that. Stoddard's going to throw that ball down the field. He's going to take some chances, right? If they're trailing, he's not afraid to take the chances. He might throw some interceptions, but Austin Knowles, Jack Wojak, some of those guys want to get down the field. They're going 5 wide almost all the time. The only time they'll really run it is on some quarterback draws, and if they have a team like Strongsville did last year where they rushed 2 and dropped 9 into coverage, then they brought Wojak into the backfield, ran out of the pistol, and kept running him because he's a great football player. So he's able to do that. The thing is, offensively, they can put up the points. Their question for Medina is more defensively. Can they stop those teams? And I think the thing where we're talking about some of those offenses, right, where we think about these teams that go 5 wide all the time, right? Washington State did it for a long time with Michael Leach. Did they have a top 20 type of defense? No, they never did at that time. So they couldn't really get past some of the perennial powers there in the Pac-12. You think about really maybe the fastest show in the NFL right now who wants to spread the football out and throw the ball over the place is the Miami Dolphins, right? With Tua finding Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and those guys. Defensively, they have a decent defense. Is it to the level of what the Browns is right now and the Niners and some of those teams? I don't think they have the defense to quite compete. If a team can piece it together where they have an offense that's so high-powered and can run the ball like that, again, if they can get the stops, I think there's a potential for it to maybe win you a championship. The tough thing, though, is this. When you go up against great teams, right, you're probably going to have to run the ball at some point. When you're leading, you're going to have to find a way to kill the clock. you're also going to have to find a way in short yardage again, where you can maybe, if I'd say 4th and short and you have to go for it, you have to be able to get that push. And that's where these teams, they need to be able to have the players in place, have the system in place to be able to switch to that when they need to and be able to run that football. So I think the biggest thing is that for some of those schools who want to throw the ball, Medina specifically, not only is it that obviously defensively they've had their struggles this year, but I think obviously you have to find a way to run the ball consistently. And I think they're kind of in the position where you know who the couple culprits will be to run that football, but can they do it consistently behind their offensive line and generate the power? I don't believe so. So short answer is it could be done, but I think everything has to fall into place, and you still have to find a way in your game plan to incorporate the run. So I don't see this year for a team like Medina the potential to win a state championship. I could see them shocking somebody, right, with some big plays, getting ahead and winning the game. But is it sustainable to knock out powers week after week after week? I don't think so, because somebody's gonna get you at some point, like Mentor did last year. They had to take some chances, ended up not working out for them.
So before we go to the young Andre Agassi over here in the corner for his response, wanted to throw this out there. This is the only thing I'll say about it. 2021 regional championship game, St. Ed's 41, Medina 6.
Mhm.
Andre?
Took me a second there. So Cole alluded to it a little bit. The defense is obviously an issue. When you get deeper into the state title game, you're not going to be able to outscore everybody. And Medina looked good last week, but you still let John Marshall put up 40. No discredit to John Marshall, but they're not doing that against a lot of the other teams in this playoff bracket, especially not later on. The bigger issue that I see is kind of like Cole said with the running game, and it's just that ability to adjust when things aren't going the way that you planned. Now, we saw Medina able to do that again against Strongsville, and we saw it when they were rushing to and dropping everybody else. That's a pretty extreme situation, and that's just you exploiting their game plan. What happens when Stoddard's not having the best game? What happens when your receivers aren't breaking quite the way that they typically do? What happens when, the clock's just getting drained on the other side, like we saw Olentangy do against Medina earlier in the season? They don't really have anything else to kind of fall back on. They don't have another part of that offense that they can, go to when things aren't going 100% to plan. So the offense is great when it's firing on all cylinders. The problem is you get off script even a little bit, it can get very difficult very quickly, and the team can get out of rhythm, and there's just really no way for them to slowly kind of climb back in. You're then leaning on Stoddard to go out and try to make the big play, which he's done plenty of times. He's a phenomenal quarterback. But when you're talking about a sustained run, when you're talking about the gauntlet that is, Division I Ohio high school football, you're going to have a very, very tough time making it to the state title. And you're almost going to need to catch fire at the absolute perfect time to be able to get all the way there. And then even then, at that point, let's say your offense does continue clicking, you don't run into any issues, you don't run into a game plan that's really designed to take you down, then you still have that defense as a liability. And you can get away with giving up 40 to John Marshall, but that's not going to go nearly as well when you start going up against, the St. Ed's of the world, or, even other teams that they were looking at this year. If they run an Olentangy again, it's not sustainable. Or Cleveland Heights, another great example, a team that was able to adjust in some tough spots this year. I mean, Brunswick, came in with a good game plan to try to stop them, and they switched up their game plan. They stopped running the ball like they like to do typically and went to the air more, and they were able to squeak out that game. Medina, I just feel like the way their offense is set up is a little more limiting. It's going to be tough for them to make those kind of adjustments as you go deeper into the playoffs.
And now it's the man who once challenged King Kong Bundy to a cage match, Dom Cleary.
That's a good one, Vince. Listen, I played on almost every team I played on was a run first team, right? You could say maybe because they had Dom Clary blocking for them on the left side, or you could just say it's just happenstance. But I played with some great running backs and some great offensive linemen, college and high school. And that's the most sustainable way in high school and then small division college football to be successful. The finesse game's fun, right? The Dolphins are very fun to watch, right? And Medina, certainly, I love watching them play. I mean, I would, if we were able to record them, I would watch, and I would just go home and watch them play. And they're a blast. The problem is that, and here's the thing is they do have talented offensive linemen. Maybe some might get talked about later. I don't know. We'll find out. We talk about the All Grit team, but they have talented offensive linemen. They are on their heels. They are essentially doing a one-on-one pass or they're doing one-on-ones pass blocking, which is the worst thing ever. If you're an offensive lineman, you're on your heels, and the defensive linemen know exactly what they're doing. They know, they can think what move they're going to do, and unless they do a QB draw with Stoddard, which they'll mix in there sometimes, but usually they do it over and over and over and over again on the same possession. They won't just randomly throw it in there, or they'll just put Jack Wojak back there and they'll run the ball, and then you can just add someone else in the box, add someone else in the line. It's almost can be predictable when they are running the ball at times, but these offensive linemen, these poor offensive linemen, are on their heels and they have no help. It's 5 versus whatever else they're throwing at you. And it's all finesse. And they have some of the best wide receivers we've seen. But if a team matches you athlete to athlete, what do you have? And the thing is that they don't have much to draw up when it comes to a run game and being out physical to other teams. They don't have it. And listen, I mean, the most successful teams that we've seen, right? Avon, who's the best player? They're running back. They're right there in the state championship conversation, indeed, too. Olmsted Falls, yeah.
Hoban for years.
I mean, Hoban. I mean, their running back was an absolute stud. I mean, Cleveland Heights, best player this year. Running back, Rocco Connie. I mean, was the best player on that offense. When your best player is your running back, especially if you have a decent to good to great offensive line, you have a chance to go a little bit further. When you just have a really good quarterback with people to throw to, you might upset a few teams, but when Eds is in your way and they can match you athlete to athlete, and they're bigger, faster, stronger in that front 7 in that box or on that offensive line, there's nothing you can do because your athletes can't athlete them, and they're not bigger, faster, stronger than their front 7.
So Ed, you were in the crowd that night. I referenced it a little bit earlier. Actually, both nights. So in 2020, I was there. So I was there both times. Drew Aller as a junior when Medina was 3-3, went into the playoffs, knocked off St. Ed's, knocked off St. Ignatius. One of the more remarkable runs. Head coach Tom Lombardo got a second chance at him the following year in 2021. Me and Cole were there for that one. Yep. As we said, 41-6 shut it down. What are your feelings on this topic? Because it is something rather unique to the normal 3 yards in a cloud of dust type of approach.
In Larry Laird's offense, his quarterback is 8 yards deep. You know where he's going to be. And the objective is to get him off that mark within 3 seconds. There are a couple of ways that teams have tried to defend him. St. Ed's, I think, did the best in 2021 against Drew Aller. After Aller went down the field in the opening drive and scored a touchdown, Ed shut him down at that point. They started rushing for getting him off his spot, and they had a spy in the middle of the field with the linebacker, who then had a key tip and an interception. Torrey Williamson, I believe, was the one that got the tip and the interception for St. Ed's. Ed's dropped 7 into coverage, and they were able to go man-to-man on their top 3 receivers and then play zone with the rest of it. Aller had nothing, and he couldn't stand in the pocket because the pass rush was coming. I saw the same thing this year against Cleveland Heights. Cleveland Heights ran for almost 500 yards on that team, and Davis ran for 365 in that game, had some wide-open runs. They were up 41-16. And if it hadn't been for, I believe Cleveland Heights just took their foot off the gas, which was similar to what they did in the St. Ignatius playoff game last year. That game shouldn't have been as close as it was. It was 62-52. But Stoddard had time to throw. His receivers, 2 of them, out-jumped the defensive backs for Cleveland Heights. The defense is suspect for Medina. They give up big plays, especially in the running game. And right now, the offensive line, when you're going to put 4 against 5, if you can get Stoddard off that spot in about 3.2 seconds, and the objective of St. Ed's has always been 2.7 all season, Stoddard's going to have to start rolling around, and then it just becomes backyard football at that point. I don't think they have enough. In 2020, when they made that run and they beat St. Ed's and St. Ignatius in back-to-back weeks, they ran out of gas against Mentor. And we've seen it for years with the Mentor offense, where they allowed 56 points in consecutive playoff games to St. Ed's and St. Ignatius, and they won them both. They had never played a whole lot of defense at Mentor, and it was their offense and their ability to score quick. But at some point, they run out of gas. They ran out of gas against Toledo Whitmore. They run out of gas against Pickerington Central, either in the championship game or in the semifinals. I think the same thing is what faces Medina. And the last point I'll make about Medina is they can be wide open, and they can go 5 wide until they get inside the 20-yard line. And all of a sudden, that box becomes a lot smaller, and the receivers don't have a lot of room to work. Their running game can exist, but if a team can shut down the run or spy the quarterback and get him off his spot in under 3.2 seconds, I think they're in trouble. Wadsworth, look for them to really pepper them with the run game. They can do it. They can run that read option. It may be back and forth, and it may be another 62-52 game, but Wadsworth, I think, is a legit team to challenge Medina in that 3-6 matchup this weekend.
Thank you. Then that matches what I said last week about Wadsworth. You mentioned Mentor, which made me think of Mitch Trubisky, which made me think of the Pittsburgh Steelers, which made me think of one Dominic Clary.
I was at that game. It was horrible.
Were you there yesterday?
It was cold. My dad looked at me and said, I can't do this anymore. It's raining, it's cold, and they stink. I did not see him the entire second quarter. He kept sending me pictures, selfies of him randomly around the stadium. I've never seen him just disappear just to be under the shade or under shelter. He hated it. It was a horrible time. I love being with my dad, though, so that was a plus.
I love it. So, Dom, we don't want you to go too deep as we're trying to wrap things up here, but this is something that's huge. So we all remember the All Madden team. You explained this last week. Again, I'm going to throw this. What do they call that when you have to sign something so you don't get sued? The old the waiver of
the NDA.
Yeah, but no, the compliance thing where they can't sue the crap out of you if the kid trips and falls in your house. What is this thing called?
A waiver?
Fine.
I will tell you in 6 years when my son graduates from law school.
Yeah. All right. So the school here is that okay? Again, okay. To be on this team, you had to play in one of the games they broadcasted.
Yes.
So say for nine games, you were king of the world's greatest football player. But the one game of theirs, where they broadcasted your game, if you didn't do great that night, you might not be on this team. It is strictly a one-game sample of the game they broadcasted. Brunswick has a couple cracks at it because you guys had them a couple times.
Yeah.
You haven't done a couple times. So wanted to throw that out there. We're kind of kicking around a different idea at the end of the year, maybe an all Vince team of the teams I covered, whatever. We'll have fun with it. So if your son and or daughter, whatever the case may be, isn't on this team, please do not take offense to it. Okay.
All right. Well, first we're gonna start off with our reserve quarterback, right? Not every position has a reserve, just the quarterback and the running back, right? So they're on the team. They're just, they're the second one on the list, right? Andrew Cool from Holy Name. He's a senior. We love the way he played. The team had a tough year this year. Not everyone's getting the description, just Andrew Cool, really, but love the way he played. He's the alternate. The guy who is the captain of the offense, someone that we absolutely loved in that same exact game, Elijah Gray from Normandy. He's a junior. He's the captain of the offense. Loved watching him play. I talked a lot with his offensive coordinator, learning more about him. The broadcast team, we fell in love with him and the type of player he is. Here's the rest of the offense. Running back, Zach Barnhart from North Ridgeville, sophomore, rough and tumble running back. From Wadsworth, Kyra Figueroa, senior. I'm going to mess up some of these names, so I apologize. At wide receiver, Jackson Wiley from Olentangy. He's a sophomore, absolute stud there for the Braves. Jack Wojak from Medina. He's a senior, again, another stud. And a kid that we loved. It takes at least 3 guys to bring the small guy down. Cooper Neal from Brunswick. He's a junior. Devin Zahersky's our tight end from Berea-Midpark. He's a senior. He's one of 3 Berea-Midpark players, I believe, that's on this list. Then our flex or athlete, Trent Habernicki from Olmsted Falls. He's a senior. Small sample size we've seen from him. but I really enjoyed watching him play. Offensive lineman Mason Zahersky, Berea-Midpark. He's a junior. He was just a menace against Midview before he got hurt in that game that we saw. A Madonna offensive lineman's featured on this, Pete Jarvis. We've seen him play a lot. He's from Madonna. He's a senior. Again, big physical pass blocker, doesn't give up too much. He's a really fun player to watch on that offensive line. Mitchell Wagaman from North Ridgeville. He's a junior, really commands that offensive line. This is a name I've been trying to pronounce all week long, so I apologize in advance. Cleveland Heights senior Abdu Dai, I believe is how I'm going to pronounce it. If I am wrong, please correct me. But yeah, he's on this list as well. And then from North Royalton, the big senior John Palkovitz, pardon me. And then now to our defense. Andrew Hanchuk from Berea-Midpark. He's a senior. I mean, you see this guy, he's just a menace. He wears number 0, and he's just unblockable from what we've seen. Jaquan Stubbs from Cleveland Heights. He's a junior. I mean, the kid he's chiseled out of marble. The kid is huge, and you cannot get inside of him. It's fun to watch. Luke Ryder from Wadsworth. He's a senior. Brandon Caesars, who I thought I was talking about when I was talking about Stubbs. So Caesar is who I was describing before, Cleveland Heights junior. Our defensive captain, it was never a doubt. This list was made because of how much we loved watching him play. Keegan O'Malley from Brunswick. He's our captain of this defense. He's all over the place. You can put him on the left or the right in the center. Just phenomenal player. Another phenomenal player. He's a linebacker, but he plays on the line a lot. Carson Mattis, North Ridgeville. He's a junior. He could have been a captain too. I mean, he reads that snap and he is in the backfield. Michael Pierce, he's from Solon. He's a junior. You know, in that defense struggled. He was in every play. Even if he missed the tackle, he was in the backfield. He was the first one there. I mean, he almost made every play for that defense. Luke Stewie from Avon Lake. He's a junior, having a phenomenal season, 3-star recruit this year, getting a lot of love from a lot of colleges. Xavier Compton from North Ridgeville. He's a senior. He's a defensive back on that defense. It's just no-fly zone on that kid. Dane West from Midview. He's a senior as well. He's our defensive back. He really stood out when we saw that Midview team play. And then Talon Hulvey. Cole, you're the one that really had a strong recommendation for him. But I liked what I saw from him as well. He made plays for that Medina defense, and that caps off our all grit team. The article will be posted when. So if you want to see this and show the kid or show the family, the article will be posted.
Well, guys, thank you again. And like I said, this is something where you're going to want to be on this team next year. So if you're a sophomore or a junior, you're going to want us to broadcast your game next year. Go ahead. If you really firmly believe that your team is going to be in a game that we must broadcast, let us know about it. Email me, vince.mckee@keonsports.com. Tweet at one of these guys before we wrap it up. Where can we find the three of you on Twitter?
Yeah, for me, CDM_2910. That's my Twitter handle. I'll toss it to Dom.
Just Dominic Clary is what it is. DOMENIC. There's not 2 I's. It's an E instead of the first I. And then Clary. So yeah, just follow me there on Twitter. That's all my handles is Dominic Clary.
And then you can find me on Twitter at It's Soder Not Pop. So see my last name there, SOEDER, not Pop.
So we're going to wrap it up here. And before we go around one last time, we just talked about the broadcast schedule. Last week, Brandon gave away his favorite memory. It was that Normandy versus Holy Name game that you guys ended up doing last seconds out of nowhere. Ended up being a classic. Each week I kind of give a little bit of my own, one of my favorites. And it's ironic because he's sitting right there in one of the cubes. But week 1. So I've always said week 1 of the broadcast season of high school football season, expect something to go wrong, expect something to be switched on you last second, expect unexpected. So about 16 minutes before kickoff, I get a text from my friend Kate, who happens to be his daughter, who happens to be one of our top editors, and says, "Hey, you want to come up and call the game with my dad?" So that was the my first ever Parma Holy War, Padua versus Holy Name. Zero prep, but Ed walked me through it like a champ. So thank you again. Definitely one of my favorite memories. But Cole McDaniel, it's your turn. What is your favorite memory of the broadcast season the three of you just had?
Yeah, I think Brandon definitely touched on it last week, so I'm going to kind of move off of this and go to something else. But he's spot on, right? Where we had the scheduling change, and what ended up being the most competitive, wildest game we had all season was the Normandy Holy Name matchup, which wasn't even on our original schedule. Really loved that one. But I think what I have to say is, even though I had a lot of great moments from individual weeks, I think the biggest thing for me was actually something that was a decision that was made well before the season. And I think that was adding Brandon to the broadcast.
Yes.
For me as the play-by-play, it made things so much more fun all year. And it was a huge addition because for those who maybe last year didn't get to hear Brandon because he was behind the scenes, he is the biggest reason why we were able to do what we did on YouTube last year and this year. He had everything set up with the OBS and the programming and made sure everything was going smoothly. And once we had it really down last year, then it's like Brandon's too good and he's too talented. You hear it from him reading ads anyway. He's about the perfect voice to read your ads. So again, if anybody wants to sponsor with us and be on the broadcast next year and you want Brandon's wonderful voice reading those ads to be on those, make sure you reach out to us here this offseason. But Brandon's too talented to not get his voice on the broadcast, and to get him on there was huge because people don't realize how with high school football, how hard Dom works as the color commentator. This isn't the luxury of when I'm calling Baldwin Wallace, right? Or, we have college athletics and they're feeding us stats, or even some of those schools like Ignatius and Ed's, there are a few that they can feed you stats. The vast majority of places cannot do that. So we have to take our own stats. So Dom's over there always calling the game with me while he's also trying to tweet out updates. And he does then the halftime show as well. And he's looking up scores as we get closer to half. And he's taking stats on every play as he's trying to broadcast. He has so much going on that last year when it was just me and him there talking, again, there was a little bit more downtime. And Dom did a great job filling that time, but he's got to focus on doing that as well. So having Brandon be able to step in and knowing the cues of Dom, and when he sees Dom's head buried into the computer and typing up stats, he could instantly get the cue, okay, it's my time to speak. And I thought it went seamlessly with having the three on the broadcast. Having Brandon was a huge addition, but it made it more fun too, where we could then joke around even more, especially in the occasional blowout material of some of those games where they did become blowouts. So we had a lot of fun there at the end, a lot of fun joking around in general. So I think that moment that we decided at the beginning of the year was my favorite moment because it established an even more fun year throughout this year. So of course, a pleasure to have Brandon on the broadcast, and so thankful to have such talented guys as part of the three-man crew with me.
One of the easiest decisions we've ever made. Just to let you know, Brandon.
I appreciate that, guys. And I don't taking last year off to make sure everything worked from a technical standpoint. I had no issue doing that at all. And I'm glad that it's really kind of produced the product that we have now. But, just to kind of reiterate off what Cole said, and I'll keep it short, but it was a blast being able to call with you guys this year. And I agree. It felt like it was as smooth of a broadcast as we could get. Like we all really figured each other out from week one. Despite some technical issues and things we were having right off the rip, because as Vince says, expect something to go wrong week one, and it has yet to fail us. But all of that said, it was an awesome time this year, and I really appreciate all you guys.
Oh, absolutely, and I'm really glad you said that, Cole. Thank you.
Yeah.
I thought that for a long time. I'll say this, and we'll wrap things up, and hope I don't get choked up here. But basically, as a company owner many years ago, the initial thought was, how am I going to have a few extra bucks in my pocket this year for Christmas? And then the initial thought was, we're going to send the girls to St. Brennan's. I need a few extra bucks. And I thought to myself, hey, Keon Sports might be that outlet. And then I met Cole, right? And I had already known Brandon. And one of the things Brandon always pushed me to do was be better. How can we be better? What can we do to be better? Cole came in, first thing he did, you guys can't see it on screen, but we went from a little Zoom recorder where literally I would talk in this Zoom recorder and tape myself calling the football game. People in the box looked at me like I was a complete moron, but that was the way we were going to sell sponsorships. I'd go home, I'd upload it to this thing called Podbean, which absolutely stinks. And that's what we were producing for sponsors, right? Cole and Brandon came in my life like guardian angels, right? And the next thing I know, we got better, we got bigger. Then Dahmer, okay, my Italian brother from a different mother, he got bigger, we got better. So when it came about this year, and I thought to myself, man, Brandon's been with me since day one. You know what I mean? Like he just has. Guys like Tony Bogan, you know what I mean? Like we have really come together. I don't talk about it much on air, but you know, having a staff of 56 people, videographers, writers, broadcasters, you know, all that stuff makes everything a lot easier on me. I've always said I wish the name of this company, I kid you not, and the initial name of the company was going to be the Varsity Sports Report. To this day, I love it. The Varsity Sports Report. I never wanted my name on anything because I didn't want people to think it was Vince McKee and nobody else. That's not the case. Guys, if you see the 3 boxes here, couldn't do it without those 3 guys. Couldn't do it without guys like Devin Lowe, Brandon Marvel, who came over here from NEO Sports. Couldn't do it without Tony Bogan. Tony Bogan is key on sports. The kid bleeds key on sports. So all of that needs to be recognized on air. Thank you, Cole. That will do it for this week. I'm going to let you guys go around the board one more time. Tell us what you're looking forward to the most this week, and then we'll take it home.
Well, first I want to say this, Ed, thanks for joining us. Obviously, it was a pleasure to have you here on this this podcast. And by the way, I know you said you're never really on the camera, but again, you look like a natural here doing this with us. So
occasionally I show up on camera, but they make me do a stand-up, but I much prefer my studio and my headset.
No, sounds good. Yeah, no, absolutely. Pleasure having you. But for this week for me, again, actually myself and Chris Grenew, we're actually going to be at the Berea-Midpark at Cleveland Heights matchup on Friday. That's one where 2 teams who played at the very beginning of the season, they're going to face off again. That's a Berea-Midpark team where we all pretty much as a group said that they were top 2, top 3 there in the SWC. That's a talented Berea-Midpark team, but of course, size of the school, they have to play in Division 1. And they actually played Cleveland Heights tough for a little bit earlier in the year. Going to be a really tough matchup against them. But if they can get their big defensive linemen in Hanchuk and Zahersky maybe disrupting the run a little bit, it could actually stay close for a while because Berea-Midpark has a really talented team. But Heights is really tough. Obviously, the number 2 seed there in that region. I'm looking forward to that one. Not only will I have the written recap, but then Chris is going to put up the highlight package. So there's going to be a lot of coverage on that game. Certainly looking forward to that.
Brandon.
Yeah. So again, thank you, Ed. This was awesome having you on. It's always good to have another voice here on the podcast. But as far as what I'm looking forward to this week, I won't put a ton of time on it, but Wadsworth, Medina. You know, Wadsworth is a team that we didn't see till late in the year that I think all of us really liked. Ed, I know you mentioned a little bit about Wadsworth as well. So there's a lot to really like about this team. I'm excited to see what they can potentially do against Medina. And, you know, we don't really know what to expect going into this game. Medina does still have the ability to put up points. They have the ability to upset anybody. So I'm excited to see, you know, how that kind of plays out. And then just to give up the last little bit of my time, I do have to eat a little bit of crow last week. One of the teams I specifically mentioned, we were talking about Catholic schools earlier to start this, was St. Ignatius getting into the playoffs despite having 1 or 2 wins coming in. And they go in and they upset a very, very good Mentor team, a team that was heavily favored going into that matchup. So again, congratulations to St. Ignatius. You guys deserve it. It was an excellent win. And now interested really to see what they can do as they move on.
Dahmer.
Yeah, and I'm gonna carry the theme that the past 2 people before me did. Ed, thank you. It was nice talking to you. I just love your knowledge of just high school sports in general. And by the way, I didn't realize this until you started talking at the very beginning. I actually talk to your daughter all the time when I go to Akron games because I'm pretty sure she works in the. She literally talks about you every time, and we talk about Ed's football.
Yeah, she has recently been or picked up the position. She's a GA with the University of Akron. She moved over after 4 years in Malone. I got a call, and they wanted her to come in, and so she'll be doing her master's degree for the next 2 years there at Akron.
And Akron does a great job there. I'm there almost every home game. I'll be there Wednesday, so I'm pretty sure
Wagon
we'll be
wheel.
talking about this Wednesday.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm excited to see North Ridgeville. They've had injury problems. The quarterback that we saw at the beginning of the year, he's dressing, not playing. So that dynamic there, it's a little bit different. I'm interested to see how they go against a really talented Highland team for the second year in a row. Highland's been really talented, so I'm interested to see that matchup. That's where I'll be. I mean, you have a running back that only played one half of football, so for the playoffs so far, right? So even though it got closer at the end, I'm interested to see what happens there. Right now, North Ridgeville, if they can't figure out the injury problems, this playoff run might be a lot shorter than I think they initially expected when starting off the season undefeated. So I'm interested to see how Highland matches up with them and if the injuries can catch up. I always follow the games that Devin Lowe does. I don't know how. It seems like he always has the best game in town. So I'm pretty sure that from the look at it, the St. Ignatius and the Kent McKinley game will somehow be a thriller. He always has a good game. So I of course I follow what he does as well. But really, even our YouTube recaps, I watch all those. I mean, I love them. So, and if you're the viewer, watch them as well because they're fantastic. So that's what I'll be doing this Friday.
Thanks, Dom. And Devin Lowe covering our one of our biggest games every week may or may not be intentional. But anyway, credit to our guy who makes the high school football schedule of coverage. I don't know his name, something McKee. Regardless, so Ed, I do as these guys said, thank you, man. I've known you for years now, so this was a blast. I appreciate it. And like I teased you last week when you called, I said, listen, if anybody else is calling me at midnight on a Tuesday night, I'm pretty sure my wife is going to accuse me of having an affair unless she knows it's you or one of these guys. So definitely fun to sit in my car and talk to you for nearly an hour after midnight. But thanks. Good times. Obviously, I'm going to go out on a hunch here. I'm pretty sure I know what you're looking forward to this weekend. But just go ahead and take all mystery out of it.
Well, I will be in the stands. My football season coverage has officially come to a close unless St. Ed's and St. Ignatius both win. Then we'll cover Holy War 2.0. But I think it's a tough road for St. Ignatius down at Canton McKinley to do it back-to-back weeks on the road the way they have, considering they've had their worst season since 1947. Losing 7 in a row since that time, and the 2 wins in the regular season were the worst that they had since that same time frame coming out of World War II. So you got to remember that's what they were playing against. For St. Ed's, I'll be in the stands. I'll be watching them play Canton Glen Oak. I expect my son to play quite a bit in that game as a reserve offensive lineman. And I'll leave you with this number. Actually, I'll leave you with 2. First, for Coach Lombardo at St. Ed's, he has 4 state championships. He has 29-4 in the postseason. So he has as many championships as he has losses in the postseason in his 8 seasons plus now at St. Ed's. And how about this number 4? What St. Ignatius did, and we want to talk about history, going out to Mentor. Mentor had never lost a first-round playoff game at home. So St. Ignatius ended that streak. Those teams had played 6 different times in the series. They had played in the regular season and in the postseason. This was the first time that the same team won in both the regular season and the postseason game. And going into that game, if you had said that St. Ignatius was only going to score 10 points and beat Mentor, the odds were certainly against them, as Mentor, since 1993, was 113-3 when holding an opponent to 10 or less points. The last time that they lost a game holding an opponent to 10 or less was in the fall of 2001. They lost to Canton Glen Oak, and then in the mid-90s, they lost to Warren Harding, and they lost to Shaw back in 95, 6-0 in a complete rainstorm, so nobody could move the football there, but only 3 times, 113-3. Were the Cardinals when they hold an opponent to 10 or less. They held St. Ignatius to 10, simply couldn't get that offense going against the Wildcats.
Couple things. Thank you again for joining us just to send us home here. Number one, Ed, I will see you this weekend. I'm covering that game, so I will see you Friday night. I will make a point of coming down to say halftime, to say hello at halftime. I know for a fact last year in the second round when they beat Massillon Jackson. I actually sat next to you and watched the halftime show, and it's very rare that I watch the halftime show, almost never. But that Massillon Jackson band, my God, like that was one of the best halftime shows I've ever seen. So I will definitely make a point of coming and saying hello to you, as well as I will be covering that game. First time I've ever covered Glen Oak. It's a very short list of teams I've never covered. They are definitely on it. Excited to see them. Dahmer, speaking of which, please tell Don Marzano, who runs the Highland media team, that I said hello. Highland, quick story for everybody, and I'll make it short. My first ever game as a beat reporter in 2015, stringing for the Plain Dealer at the time. That was my first ever assignment. It was Highland versus Brunswick, another rivalry game. They sent me out there. Talk about Coach Lombardo. He had just left to go to St. Ed's. This was open up the 2015 season, and it was the first game at that beautiful new stadium. Dom, you're going to love it. It's one of the nicest high school football stadiums in the area. They treat you great. The food's going to be good. The view's going to be good. You're
The only reason you go to
Now
games,
you're
right?
talking my language.
You're definitely in a good night. St. Ed's, I already know Donato's pizza, popcorn, soda. Got it down. But Highland is going to treat you right. So again, want to thank Ed, the Italian Stallion, Dom Clary, and again, as Cole said, definitely Brandon. I mean, I don't want to call him an addition because we already had him, but it is a challenge to make sure that every single person on this team, we are realizing their full potential. So love having him with us. My man Cole here. Now I got to kick him out of my house because I want to go work out. I'm teasing. You can spend the night if you want.
I think I'm okay. I
You
got a
think you're
wife
okay?
to go home.
All right,
She'll kill me if I spend the night here.
Well, Halloween starts in
I told her I try to get home at 9:30, and we're pushing that. So yeah.
Are you dressing up tomorrow for Halloween? I know you did last year in the office.
No.
What did you dress up as? Ted Lasso a couple years ago?
No. 2 years ago, I went in as the Grinch.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
Of course you did.
absolutely.
So, I'll tell you what. This is a show I don't have an ego, even though my name's on the shirt. I will let Cole take us home in the voice of the Grinch. Take it.
Now
Yeah. I'm putting you on the spot.
he's putting me on the spot here for the podcast. Good thing I can edit this thing and edit this out. So, do you really want me to do this?
Yeah.
Okay. The nerve of those who's invited me down on such short notice. Well, guys, thanks for listening in here on this episode for Vince, for Dom, for Ed joining us, as well as Brandon. I am the Grinch. Have a terrible Christmas.